Hello folks, and welcome to another great prep video which will be to practice the half and half strategy for reading comprehension. We will do this by going through a reading comprehension walkthrough. On the right hand side you see the 9 strategies that we discussed in previous videos as we go through the first half of the reading comprehension strategy, which is to focus on the reading comprehension passage itself. This passage is likely going to be a long passage and you should take about 3 to 4 minutes to read through it. Let's do it together. In the many drawings that Dutch astronomer, Marxist thinker and council communist Anton Pannekoek made of the Milky Way over the course of his life, it is not immediately clear what we are looking at. As you go through the first few sentences of the reading comprehension passage, you should apply strategy number 1, which is to mentally classify the passage into which category it falls into, or what the subject matter of the passage is anticipated to be. In this case, we do see that the word astronomer and the phrase Milky Way both came up within the first 2 lines of this passage. So applying strategy number 1, we can conclude that this passage is most likely going to deal with the topic of astronomy, which is a subset of science. The band of stars appears like a smudged backbone, sometimes in true color, white stars on a black background, and sometimes inverted, with the stars as dark points and the milk of the Milky Way made inky. Reading through this sentence, the strategy that we need to apply for this sentence seems to be strategy number 5, which is to keep track of words in italics or quotes, and to keep track of various punctuations like question marks, etc. So you see the 2 words which are in quotation marks here, true and milk. When you see a word on the GRE reading comprehension which is within quotation marks, what that means is the literal meaning of the word should not be used. For instance, the word milk in quotations here does not refer to the literal liquid that we get from animals, typically a cow. What milk here refers to is an allusion to the color white, which is how the Milky Way galaxy supposedly looks to us. So it is an allusion to the color white and not the literal meaning of the word milk. So at this point we have applied strategy number 1 and strategy number 5 within the first paragraph. They are simultaneously vague and precise, something between a charcoal rubbing and an X-ray. So the key strategy here is strategy number 3, which is to mentally identify what the pronouns are referring to. So in this case, the word they. These words typically happen or occur at the start of a sentence. So what you have to do is replace the pronouns and words like they with the actual object they're referring to. In this case, they is actually referring to the drawings of this gentleman, Anton panikoic. So you see, at this point, there have been at least 3 strategies that you had to apply. And the good thing about applying these strategies is you're able to summarize what the first paragraph is trying to say. So at this point, we can confidently conclude that this entire reading comprehension passage is going to deal about astronomy. It's going to be talking about the drawings of the Dutch astronomer Anton Pannekoek. And these drawings are going to be both vague and precise. And that most likely is what is going to be expanded upon in the coming paragraphs. Continuing. In fact, the drawings are not technically of the Milky Way at all, because according to Pannekoek, such a thing was not actually accessible as a purely objective entity. Please focus on the phrase "in fact," and this is going to be the application of strategy number 2, which, as you're reading through, you need to identify. In fact is a continuity word. That is, this phrase is continuing the idea of the previous sentence or the previous paragraph. And this makes the mental accounting easy for you, because now you know it is continuing the idea and you don't have to earmark in your mind a change in the thinking or a change in the idea, which is what we call a turn word. So this makes the passage simpler to read. And that's why I'll say that so far this is an easier passage, because you have a lot more continuity words than there are turn words. While it was widely understood in Pannekoek's time that even highly skilled astronomers fall prey to observational bias during stargazing, a phenomenon known as the personal equation, Pannekoek went further, theorizing that what we perceive as the Milky Way is actually a visual trick that emerges at the intersection of the stars and the people on Earth who perceive them. You can see there are phrases in quotations, which is strategy number 5. So you see that here. So that's important. These are favorite phrases which could come up in one of the questions for the reading comprehension. So it's good to make a note of that. And then I think the other main idea here is you're talking about the fundamental theory of Pannekoek. Okay, so this is the main idea here. During an article published in an 1987 issue of Popular Astronomy, Pannekoek discussed the well-known problem of the Milky Way's ocular inconsistency, wondering if the character of the galactic phenomenon precludes its being fixed by delineation. Now here we will use strategy number 7, which is identifying GRE words and synonyms and antonyms as you read through the passage. Okay, this is, I believe, one of the biggest giveaways of any GRE comprehension passage, the synonyms that are used for different words and also any antonyms. What do I mean by that? So applying strategy number 7, the first thing is, where are the GRE words? Oh, there you go, the big words, right? So ocular inconsistency. This seems like a big GRE word, right? Ocular inconsistency. And then what you'll find is most likely there will be a synonym or another word or phrase in the paragraph which will be similar to this big GRE phrase, right? So here, going back, you actually do see a phrase which is the visual trick. So the point I'm trying to make here is strategy number 7 is by far the best strategy, because what the GRE loves to do is use synonyms. So visual is the same thing as ocular, both pertain to the eye, and a trick is like a magic trick. And you can also think of a trick as something being inconsistent with your thinking or understanding, right? And that's why you get tricked. So this ocular inconsistency and visual trick mean the same thing. Now, if you continue reading, you'll find that there's another synonym, which is optical illusion, right there. Optical again pertains to the eye, and illusion, like I said, is the same thing as a magic trick or an inconsistency. So you see, this is a favorite use of synonyms and antonyms in the GRE. And the good thing about being on the lookout for these is because at the end of the day, if you want to summarize this entire paragraph, because you have the same phrase coming 3 times, you could at this point even summarize this paragraph and say this paragraph is about Panicoic's theory, which essentially is talking about some tricks that your eye plays on you when you're looking at astronomical phenomenon. So that is essentially the gist of this paragraph. All right, and continuing, this was not a failing of observational science. It reflected what the Milky Way actually was. You have a colon here. A kind of optical illusion that changed its shape depending on the lived experiences of the observer, the historical period, and how these experiences informed the patterns that the mind constructed out of the fluid nature of reality. That's a pretty long sentence, but there are at least 3 strategies here. The first is, like I said, this, and this goes back to strategy number 3, because what essentially we are saying here is, what is this referring to? So mentally you have to replace the word this. So this was not just a failing. So typically it should be in the previous sentence. So this here is the well-known problem of the ocular inconsistency. So that's what this is, right? It's the visual trick and the optical illusion. And then you can also apply strategy number 5 here. And it's pretty obvious that when you see a colon, you see the colon? This basically means that this is good. Whatever follows this colon essentially is trying to explain what is coming previous to the colon. Okay, it's trying to explain. So essentially they're trying to describe the visual trick or the ocular inconsistency, and that is the definition which follows after the colon. One other thing which you should observe is listing. Okay, and it's not really here, but maybe I should just add a strategy here, and I can just call it strategy number 10, and it is basically the idea of listing. And this is another style of writing which is very common, not just on the GRE but in general, where the author makes lists. You can think of lists as bullet points in a PowerPoint presentation. So in this case, you do see there is a list here. It changed its shape depending on, okay, the lived experience, which is number 1, 2, their historical period, and 3, how these experiences inform the patterns. So typically these lists come separated by commas. So that's how you can actually determine these lists. And it's important to know, a list because it's outlining three different things, right? So this will really help you if you can identify the lists as you're going through trying to answer the questions. And there's also a list right at the start, right? In the many drawings, the Dutch astronomer, right? So he's an astronomer. Number 2, a Marxist thinker, and number 3, a council communist. So he's all three, right? That's a list too. So this is strategy number, I'll say number 10, listing. All right. Panicoic's drawings then are of the act of perception itself, an approach informed by his political beliefs. So here you can apply a strategy number 3 because strategy number 2 because of the continuity word, right? Then this is a continuity word. Strategy number 2. All right, so at this point we are through 2 paragraphs. We have applied these strategies. We have a sense of what this whole passage is about. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Like Marx and Engels, and who drew on Feuerbach, Hegel, and Heraclitus, Panicoic understood material reality to be a continuous and unbounded stream in perpetual motion. All right. Now, one of the pitfalls of the GRE is these really, really unfamiliar names of people, right? Marx, Engels, Panicoic. And if you're like me and when you're reading, you try to pronounce these words mentally, you will lose precious time because every time you come across a complicated word like a name of a person, it basically can act as a roadblock. So one trick for that is every time you see the name Panicoic, just replace it by the first letter of the name. So mentally when you're reading, you just say like Marx and Engels, P understood material reality. That will help you save a few precious seconds as you're reading through this. The strategy to apply here will be the strategy of synonyms and antonyms. We're going to apply strategy number 7. And why is that? Because they talk about a continuous and unbounded stream in perpetual motion. All right. Now, you have to be a very astute reader, but you saw the word fluid right here. So fluid is synonymous to perpetual motion, right? Fluid means something which is in flux, which is a GRE word. Flux is a constant state of motion, a constant state of change, right? And the antonym of fluid is what is called plastic, something which really cannot change. So the word fluid is essentially linked to the phrase perpetual motion. So again, the basic idea that is being communicated here is extending the idea of the fluid nature of reality, right? The fluid nature. And even the word stream, right? A stream is something which flows. It's a water body that flows like a river, right? A stream. So that again is a synonym for fluid. So I hope you're getting the idea that these synonyms and antonyms can really help you understand the basic gist of the passage and not lose track of what is being communicated, right? It's the same idea which is being expounded on using different words, essentially. He also believed that the human brain has a tendency to generate fixed, abstract patterns from this fluidity. All right, that's the word fluid, which came again. Patterns that are always socially and historically contingent. Any view including that of the stars in the sky, was therefore. That's a continuity word for you. Strategy number 2. Any view, including that of the stars in the sky, was therefore always making and remaking itself in the mind of the observer according to their individual physiology, psychology, and the distinct material conditions of their place and period. Making and remaking. You see that? Making and remaking. What that basically means is tying back to the concept of fluidity, right? Making and remaking. It's change, right? So this ties back to fluidity. So again, you're using a synonym. It's strategy number 7. All right, guys. And the last thing is listing, right? You see strategy number 10 being applied here. There was a list which is physiology, psychology, and the distinct material conditions of the place and period. So at this point, you've applied quite a few strategies. Notice that not all the strategies were relevant here. Strategy number 6 is always relevant, right? When you're reading passages, you want to practice your eye movement, and we will discuss about that in other videos. But strategy 4, for example, was not really relevant here. And strategy number 8, which is a super special strategy, is not relevant here either. The last thing we have to do after reading the passage is apply strategy number 9, which is a sentiment to the passage. You have to assign what is the attitude of the author here. And you didn't really see many negative words, right? Because if you've practiced all the other strategies, the main words were visual tricks, optical illusions, they use the word fluidity. There was nothing really very negative anywhere. And you don't even see anything really positive of phrase or something where there is some kind of a praise. So you don't really see any positive or negative words. So what is the sentiment? I'll say the sentiment is going to be neutral. Okay, so that's really, really critical, and this will really help you in the questions that follow. So at this point, we are done with the first half of the strategy. We'll now continue with the second half, which is going through the questions and answers and ensuring that we are not tripped up by any of the answer choices. Thank you so much. Have a good day, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Good luck for the GRE.